Have you ever wanted to know how to make perfectly matched ear wires? Your handcrafted earrings deserve to be finished with handmade ear wire. So today I'm going to show you my secret for making perfectly matched pairs of my classic French hooks. And the beautiful thing about this technique is that it works for nearly any style of ear wires, like these marquee ear wires for instance. Or how about these circle ear wires, square ear wires, and even my popular flourish French hooks. Hey there, jewelry maker. My name is Wendy and I'm the wire weaver behind door 44. If you want to learn to make wire jewelry, this channel's for you. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about wire. I typically recommend dead soft wire for almost everything that I make. Ear wires are one exception. I usually start with half hard wire, and the reason that I do that is because it saves me time. Ear wires are going to be the part of earrings that are going to take the most abuse. So you want these wires to be nice and firm so that they'll maintain their shape. If you use just dead soft wire and you don't harden it, you're going to have some problems with your wires getting bent out of shape quite easily. So I'm going to go ahead and use half hard wire today, but I'm also going to show you a trick for hardening your wire if you're using dead soft wire. And that's going to help you end up with nice and firm ear wires that are going to hold their shape over time. So to get started, you're just going to need 4 inches of wire per pair of earrings. So go ahead and cut one 4-inch length and we'll get started. Okay, so I have a 4-inch length of 20 gauge wire here, and this is a trick that I demonstrated in my Lucky You earring series. This is the way that I harden wire when I'm making ear wires. So I'm starting with half hard wire, which is already fairly stiff, but I'm going to make it even harder by just rolling it on my bench block and pressing firmly with the hardwood wedge from my ring clamp. Now you can, if you don't have a ring clamp, you can use any piece of hardwood. If you just have a scrap piece of millwork laying around your house, or just a block of wood, even softer wood like a block of a 2x4 will probably work for this. And you just want to press firmly and roll this wire across the bench block. And what this is doing is it's work hardening our wire, and we're making this half hard wire even harder. So it's going to be nice and stiff and springy by the time I'm ready to start making my ear wires. Now this is my favorite way to harden wire, but this is something that you do have to do before you start making your ear wires. So if you don't have a hardwood block, I will show you another technique for hardening the ear wires after they've been formed. But like I say, this is my favorite way to do it because it does 2 things. It straightens your wire and it makes it nice and stiff and springy. So now this half hard wire is even harder, which is perfect because this wire is going to maintain its shape really well. So once you've done that, you want to go ahead and mark the center of your wire. So I'm just going to take my fine point permanent marker and I'm going to mark this 4-inch wire. You can see there it's 4 inches. I'm going to mark that right at 2 inches in the center. And then I want to take my flat nose pliers and we're going to fold this wire in half. So I'm going to grasp just to the side. Now keep in mind I'm left-handed, so I'm putting my pliers on the left-hand side of my mark. If you're right-handed, it's going to be on the right-hand side. So you're just going to work everything sort of a mirror image of what I'm doing here. But notice that I'm just a little bit to the left of that mark, and I'm just going to start pressing this wire into a nice tight fold. So I'm just pressing that closed, and notice that I'm switching my flat nose pliers back and forth between the 2 sides of the wire. And what that does is it just helps keep your wire straighter, and it helps you make a tighter bend. So once we've got that bend in there, we're just going to go ahead and press that tightly closed. And this doesn't have to be perfect at this point. We're gonna trim that folded end off at the end of this process. But what we do want at this point now is we want to make sure that our wires are the same length. And you notice that I ended up with one that's just a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and come in with my super flush cutters. And if you look carefully, you can see the shorter end of that wire has the chisel tip because that was cut with the inside of my flush cutters. So I'm going to go ahead and get in there with the flush end of my cutters. Now these are super flush cutters, so they're going to leave a nice flat cut that's not going to need to be filed. If you don't have flush cutters, that's okay. You can use a needle file to file off your ends. But you can see now that I have 2 nice flat flush cuts and they're perfectly even with one another. That's what we want. So if you don't have super flush cutters, if you have regular wire cutters like these that leave just a little bit of a chisel tip on your cut, just go ahead and use your needle file to file off those ends and make them nice and smooth. And my ends are super smooth. I just have one tiny little ridge in there. Let's see if we can get this to focus. You can just barely see that ridge there, and I can even knock that off with this file if I want to. We can smooth that off. But if you have flush cutters, you typically don't need to do this. So that's the first step of making your ear wires. We're just going to make that fold and make sure that our wires are nice and even. And then for the next step, you're going to grab your stepped bill making pliers, and I want to grab that wire between my 2 and 3 millimeter mandrels. This is your 2 millimeter, the smaller one, and this is the one that we're going to use to make the loop. I'm just going to grasp right at the tips of those wires and hold on firmly, and I'm going to roll these around until I have a nice complete loop there. So I want to keep going until those wires butt up against the shaft in sort of a P shape that you can see there. And then at this point, we're going to use the 9 millimeter, the largest step on these pliers, to form the hook. So I'm just going to grasp these wires right between the 8 and 9 millimeter steps, and notice that my loops are resting on the smaller step, the 8 millimeter step. And then I'm just going to bend these around all the way around that 9 millimeter step until I reach that loop. So now this is what your ear wires look like. So we're just about done. And now at this point, I'm going to use this 3 millimeter mandrel, and I want to grip that folded end right there. And I'm just going to make the slightest little bend. I don't want a heavy bend. I don't want to go very far around. I'm just making a slight little curve, just so that our ear wires have sort of a nice dip at the end that's going to make them easier to slip on. And then we're just going to separate our ear wires at this point. They're fully formed. They're perfectly matched. So you can see we're going to have a nice, perfectly matched pair of ear wires because they were shaped at the same time with the same mandrels. And now we're just going to trim off just the very tip of that folded end. And there you have your perfectly matched ear wires. So these are almost complete. Now, if you don't have a wood block to harden your wire, at this point, you're going to be able to do some hardening with your hammer and bench block. But before we do that, here's a couple things you can do here. Again, if you don't have super flush cutters like I do, you're going to want to go ahead and file off these ends. And another alternative for ear wires, of course, is to use a cut burr, or they also call it a wire rounder tool. And this is just a sort of a diamond file that has a domed shape. It's a concave little cup. So you'll just put this on the end of your wire and twist. And you just kind of twist firmly. And that's going to kind of sand off the edges of your wire and round it off, smooth it off a little bit. Now, I don't particularly love using a cut burr. I think these work a little bit better if you have a rotary tool. You're going to get a little bit better results. The manual style cut burrs don't work quite as well. They do work, and a lot of people really like them. So I've linked to a cut burr on Amazon if you want to try this tool. They're pretty inexpensive. And like I say, they do work. They're just not my favorite way to smooth off ear wires. So normally what I do is I go ahead and do a little bit of hammering on my ear wires and forming, and then I'll just do some filing with a needle file, and if necessary, I'll finish with sandpaper or sanding sticks. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how to further harden your ear wires. Now, if you don't want your ear wires to be flattened at all, you want them to remain round, you can go ahead and use just a soft mallet, something like this, and just go ahead and give them some good firm taps on your bench block. And that's going to make sure that your wire maintains its nice round shape. It's not going to flatten the wire at all, but it is going to firm them up, and these wires are nice and stiff. So this is what we want for ear wires. We don't want them to be easily bent, because like I say, ear wires are the one part of earrings that will take the most abuse. Once an earring is on the ear, it, you know, has very little pressure on it, and they just hang there and look pretty. They don't need to be structural like something like a bracelet clasp or a necklace clasp, where, you know, they can easily be pulled apart. So that's one way to harden your ear wires. But I personally like to use a chasing hammer, and this is optional, of course. You don't have to do this, but I like to just slightly flatten the tips of my ear wires just a little bit. See, I didn't flatten them too much because I don't want to widen that out so much that it's uncomfortable to put on or take off, but I do want to give them that sort of hand forged finish. And I'm going to do the same thing on the loop. I'm just going to flatten that just a tiny bit, and then up here at the top of the ear wire, I'm going to add a little bit more flattening. And again, I'm not doing a lot of flattening, but you can see that these do look hand forged because they do have that sort of hammered finish about them. And then the last thing, of course, you're going to want to do is go ahead and file off the ends. Make sure these are nice and round and smooth and soft. We're just going to shape those lightly. And then one last thing you can do after you finish hammering is go ahead and get in there with your 2mm step again and just make sure that loop is nice and tightly closed. So there's your finished ear wire. It's nice and stiff and ready to attach to your earrings. I wanted to share this with all jewelry makers. Not everybody does wire weaving, but this is a style of ear wire that will work with any kind of handmade earrings that you make. So if you're a bead weaver, or you just do bead stringing, if you do micro macrame, you do micro crochet, any type of handmade earrings, these ear wires are just going to add that final handmade touch. Super easy. They're less expensive than commercial ear wires, and I think they're quite a bit more attractive than commercial ear wires as well. And that's all there is to it. How easy was it to make these perfectly matched ear wires? If you'd like to learn how to make the other ear wires shapes that were shown at the beginning of this video, be sure to grab my DIY ear wire bundle. Just follow the link in the description below where you'll save 25% off the regular price in my Etsy shop. The tutorial bundle contains 5 detailed step-by-step printable PDF tutorials for my marquee, circle, and square ear wires, as well as my popular flourish French hooks, and of course the classic French hooks that I demonstrated in this video today. That's it for today, jewelry maker. Until next time, go make something beautiful.